to make. This is a great organization, but this is a young organization. So our mission on peace initiatives for the Middle East, this is the first one. So we are going to, as a part of this organization or as an independent one, we're going to start a Muslim think tank that will hear the voice of moderate Muslims to bring peace in the Middle East. This is our first initiative, and we'll continue with this to bring peace to the Middle East in whatever way we can. So we are looking forward to working in this area as the 6 million Muslim Americans in America. How we can give something back to this great country that has given us so much. And peace is our priority, how we can do that in the Middle East. So with your help, and this has been called a Muslim think tank, but I think all of you who think on those lines as Americans are very welcome to join us when we have the criteria necessary. When we establish those criteria, anyone can join us. And let's be the moderate voice of the Muslims in America. As American Muslims, we can give something. We need that very badly. The thing that we have, I'll give you one example where the think tank can come into play. We have the Mahdi militia from the clerics of Iraq, who is al-Sadr. The second one, the one who brought for peace in the area, is Ayatollah Sistani. Both are not there, but they had a march, Sadr's army, to say all Iraqis want peace, but with strings attached to it, and that is, America must leave first. Then we're all together, we'll be one. Then we have the Maliki government that says he's not ready, he's the Shia of another party. He said he's not ready, we're not ready to let our troops go. So this is one example where our think tank can get all these issues and how we can work out something to bring them all together so that the bloodletting stops and our troops can come home. And the people who are dying there, let it stop. So that this think tank has got a lot of responsibility to do, and we understand the religion a little better than others do. So let's think on these grounds of peace in the Middle East. And that's what I wanted to say. We are creating a think tank, and that is a big positive step. And whatever it takes, and the criteria we will establish, and I hope you will all come out and help us in this the program that we are undertaking. So thank you all. And please be here. The question and answer period is very important. We have good speakers, and if you can, they will answer your questions, whatever you have. And thank you for all for coming here.
I'll ask Mr. Mohsen Naqvi to start proceedings.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على النبي الأمي أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين وما بعد فقال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتهم ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. I am very grateful to the organizers of this forum who have invited me to address you, and I'm grateful to you all to come here and spend this time in this forum and listen to what we have to say. I'm really looking forward to the question and answer session, because this is not a one-way street, and speakers usually are inclined to saying their bit and go away, and I don't agree with that. So I will be open to all kinds of questions from you, hopefully, and it is really interesting to see all these mature faces patiently to see what I and everybody else has to say. I began this with the usual praise to Almighty Lord, who is the one Lord. And I insist on this. If there is a God, there is only one God. There is no Christian God, there is no Jewish God, there is no Muslim God, and there is no Hindu God, or anything like that. There has to be just one God. And that is the common point on which we all gather, at least in this country. And the next piece that I recited is a verse from the Holy Quran, from chapter 62, verse number 2, which I would like to translate. He it is who has raised a prophet among the people of Makkah, who is one of them, and he has come to recite his verses to them, cleanse their hearts. The important point, and to give them law. The important point in this, Allah has raised a prophet from among themselves. Here the Arabic word, I don't want to take you into Arabic lexicography and grammar to bore you, but I have to emphasize this point that the word used here, ba'asa, ba'asa in Arabic is used for something which has been buried in the ground and has been dug up. So he has been raised from the same earth which you walk. This is an address to that part of the world in the time when the Prophet appeared. And this is the point of relevance for us vis-a-vis Iraq. Our government very pompously has declared that we are going to impose democracy on a backward society, feeling magnanimous. But the point, if we take this word of the Quran, is that you cannot impose a reform from outside on any society. The reform has to be internal. Unless and until the people of Iraq feel strongly that they want to bring democracy to their society, to their country, nothing is going to work. We can take the bombs, and we can take the tanks, and we can take the soldiers, and we can take night vision goggles, and we can take the laser guided technology and whatever else. Nothing is going to work unless and until the people of Iraq come to this point. Yes, we want it. And that is where the main problem is. I am here to give you a very brief historical background of what is going on in Iraq. Iraq originally was a part of the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire showed up in the world, in the eastern part of the world, as a remnant of the Abbasi Empire of Islam. Abbasi Empire is the second empire in the Islamic world. The first one was the Umayyad Empire, which truly became an empire after some 50 years of the passing of the Prophet. That is the line that is coming. And when the powers to be in the late 20th century, late 19th century, and early 20th century decided that they are going to break up the Ottoman Empire, several little countries came into being. Jordan, Syria, Iraq. These are all part of that large empire. And of course Turkey. The British decided that they would choose an elite family and appoint rulers from that family into various positions. Jordan was given to King Abdullah, who was the grandfather of the present king. And his cousin Faisal was made the king of Iraq. and they dilly-dallied about what is known to us as Saudi Arabia. They were debating themselves whether Sharif of Makkah should take the charge or someone else.
Please, the library will be closing in 30 minutes.
While this was going on,
Down 5 minutes to
the
5.
Wahhabi and the Saudi conglomerate came together in that part of the world, and they attacked Makkah and Medina and killed Sharif of Makkah. And by default, they became the rulers of that part of the world. So they are not from that family. Sharif of Makkah, King Abdullah, Faisal, who was brutally massacred in 1958, if you remember. If you're old enough to remember that. I was in college in those days. So that is the line that has been in the limelight. Now, the very, very basic history of how this civil war is going on in Iraq has also to be looked at. And there are two views. There is a view for the non-Muslim American, and there is a view for the Muslim American, which is a very, very viable community. And I feel that the Muslims of America can do a lot. They can actually influence, not only by voting in and out a government internally in the United States, but also otherwise. The United States head office is in New York. And I've been going there and I've been in communication with them. And you can all do that. You can find out what is going on in the United Nations. You can call them up, you can write to them, they'll send you a pass. You can go and sit there. If nothing else, at least sit in various meetings that have been going on. And it's important that we do that as mature, educated Muslims living in America, to influence and bring a peaceful result to what is going on in Iraq. Iraq is a mess. And I don't have to say this, we all know. The Prophet passed away after 11 years of ruling a city-state, which was established in Medina, and a law was given to that city-state, and the law was completed. And what we know now, obviously history is looked at in retrospect. We cannot go back in that time and place ourselves there and see what was happening. All we can do is look back what we know from the reports that have come down to us. There are two views. One view is that the Prophet, as a matter of habit, was used to appointing a deputy. Even if he left the city for a day, he would appoint a person from among his lieutenants and say, while I am away, you are in charge of the Islamic State. And that person would make all the decisions. We have precedent recorded in history. And not surprisingly, one report is that about 3 months before he passed away, he addressed a very large congregation of this community, reportedly 120,000 strong, which was a very large number in those days, and particularly in Arabia. And he addressed them, and he declared that his time has come, he is being called by the Creator, and there will be a day when he will be gone from this world. But that day, he is leaving two things for the community: the Book of Allah, the Quran, and a family, which is his own family. And in that family, the senior-most person was his son-in-law and cousin. And he chose him, and he presented him to the community that he will be in charge after me. So follow him. Those are the two things. The second view is that he just gave us all the necessary instruments, and he made the community self-sufficient to create a republic and choose a leader by consensus. And And that was the beginning. As it happened, the republic, the concept of republic and choosing the leader from the community really took roots in the community, and nearly 85% of the Muslims today are in that camp. Whether they understand the philosophy, the political philosophy of Islam, is totally beside the point. But they are in that camp. And there is a small minority, 15%, who are in this camp, who follow the family prophet. They're called the Shia, and those are called the Sunnis. There is a third thinking that I have noticed on the internet, and you know how active the internet is on these issues. And I've been writing to one gentleman back and forth, and his contention is that there's no succession after the prophet. And that's a very, very minority view. The view exists. And when the republic did take shape right after the prophet, the family took a step back and said, fine, you want a republic? You will have a republic. And they became homebound. For 25 years, they remained homebound. In those 25 years, the first successor only ruled 3.5 years and died a natural death. The second successor ruled for 10 years, and he made some really drastic changes and established a very, very powerful base in those 10 years. In the 10 years, after the 10 years, he was assassinated. The third successor who came, he ruled for 12 years. And he led in a lot of corrupt practices. Nepotism, his family took over the entire bureaucracy. And there was such chaos. And in the meantime, the empire was increasing from the city-state to outside the larger world. So a lot of non-Arabic speaking people were becoming Muslims. Turks and Iranians, Afghanis, so all these people were now connected to this very strong center. And because the bureaucracy had been taken over by this one family, there is a lot of oppression, wrongdoing. So from two provinces, delegations came to the center city, Medina, to give a letter of complaint. And when the letter of complaint was not accepted by the ruler, they turned violent. And they put a siege on the house. And after 3 weeks, some of the enthusiastic ones, you understand how mass mentality works, jumped into his house and killed him. So now, 2 successors were assassinated. And now, the whole city was in such a chaos. And people didn't know what to do. The actual people who lived in the city of Medina, they had closed their doors and they were staying inside, coming up because of the rioters. And finally the writers came to this son-in-law of the prophet who had become homebound all these 25 years, and they said, now you have to take charge of the community because there's nobody else qualified. And he said, no, I don't want to come in at this stage. This is a very chaotic situation. And you have done a lot of wrong things. And I will become responsible for everything you have done if I take charge of it. So now they put a siege on his house. And they said, unless you take charge, you become the ruler, we will kill you. We'll attack your house, we'll raise the house down, we'll kill your children. Under this threat, he took control. Being the man he was, he tried to bring back all the justice. Now, doing the right thing from the beginning is very easy. But when something has gone totally wrong and you try to bring the right thing now, you can imagine the problems to face. And this is exactly what this man had to face. He would only rule for 4 years, and then he was assassinated in the mosque while in the middle of a midnight prayer. So that ended. When that ended, the family of the third ruler who had taken over the bureaucracy, they were in right places to control the society, and they did take charge of the society. And one of them rose and became the ruler. He ruled for another 20 years. 20 years is a long time for a dictator. He really got his roots deep. He made everything subservient to him. And at his deathbed, he decided to appoint his son as the ruler of the community. And that appointment put the last nails in the coffin of the republic. Because whatever the republic was, right or wrong, it was a republic. Elections or some kind of oligarchy, a group of elite people were supposed to choose a ruler. This was not a one-man decision. And that is how the republic had worked all these 60 years. When he appointed his son, the whole thing broke down. And the senior people in the community, the highest people, had taken a low profile. Among them was a grandson of the Prophet, and his name was Hussein. He was the son of the Prophet's daughter, and the son-in-law of the Prophet, who had become the first ruler. I'm avoiding names you can see deliberately, not confusing, because they're all Arabic names, they will confuse the audience. And those who know the names, they know the names. So this man, as soon as he became the ruler, he sent a message to the Prophet's grandson that you have to stand up and declare that I am the unopposed ruler of the Muslim kingdom. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. He said, if you don't do it, I'll cut you down. And he sent assassins to really round up, arrest him, or kill him. So he left home. He took a handful of family members, brothers, cousins, nephews, nieces, wife, sister, 2 sisters, nieces, and left home. And he traveled in the desert. And he took those roads which were not really tread on to avoid the killers. First he came to Makkah. Now Makkah, as you know, has been declared a sanctuary by the Islamic law, by the Quran. Nothing, you can't even kill a mosquito in the city. If you kill, you pay money, a fine. You cannot pluck a flower. That is the kind of sanctity that city carries. But even in that city, assassins were sent by the ruler to kill Hussein. And Hussein stood up and said, I would rather be killed 1 inch outside of the Makkah than see my blood spilled in this sanctuary. I apologize. I'm overwhelmed. So he left and went across the desert towards what is today known as Iraq. There were some sympathies for him in Iraq. He ended up in a desert which is now known to us today as the city of Karbala. The city did not exist. It's an open desert, and there was river Euphrates passing by, so there was some cultivation. He arrived in that desert and camped by the water. When the ruler heard of this, he wrote to his governor in that part of the world and said, Hussein has come to your country. I want him either arrested
Your attention, please. The live
or
will be
killed
closing in 15 minutes. If you
and
have any
send
items to
his
shut
head
down,
to me.
please bring them to the circulation desk at this time.
In
All
3-4 days'
computers
time.
will be shut down in 5
A
minutes.
large
Stop.
contingent arrived and surrounded this small band. and he was moved, his camp was moved away from the war. And pressure started building on him to surrender to the ruler's will, and he kept refusing. 4 or 5 days later, they cut them off completely from war. His women and children became thirsty and started crying, and thirsty and thirsty. But no one was going to relent. And finally, 10 days later, the armies came close to his camp and said, "We will burn your camp, we will kill you, unless you accept the rule." He said, "No, I am not going to accept the rule. I would like to live peacefully without doing anything against the government, but I am not going to declare the ruler legitimate." Finally, a battle took place which lasted about 6 hours. Every man in the camp was killed. The tents were burned, the women and children were taken prisoners and presented to the ruler 3 weeks later in Damascus. Karbala and Damascus are about 1,500 miles apart. And the ruler was so pleased to see these prisoners. These were the granddaughters of the prophet. Their chadars had been taken away. They were tied in ropes. And he was very pleased. And then he stood up and said, there neither was a revelation nor there was an angel who had come down. The Banu Hashim, the family of the prophet, had only played a game to establish their own rule. And then he addressed the elder granddaughter. Said, "You see, your brother didn't listen to him. See what has happened to you? You have been humiliated. You've been defeated. You're tied in ropes." And she said to him, "Our glory was given to us by Allah. No one can take it away from us. You can tie us in ropes, you can put us in prison, you can kill our men. Nothing is going to put us down." I like the story of Venus courage. Getting killed for a man is easy, relatively easy. But for a woman to see a menfolk being killed, losing everything, being tied as prisoners and presented to a ruler in open court, is a very, very grave thing. Anybody can break down. But this one. So the minority party that had gone with the family naturally sided with this oppressed lot. The majority party did not want to side with this ruler. They wanted to stay away. The political forces were so strong that they became a part of the camp. And that is the tragedy of the whole. Today, you talk to any Muslim in the world, nobody will justify the actions of this ruler. So he was bad. But governments had to side with the government. I was in Saudi Arabia, and they praised that ruler because he was the ruler.
Who is he? What is his name? Could you tell me which ruler?
His name was Yazid. His name was Yazid. He was the son of Muhammad. So that is the emotional split between the two parties. That's the emotional split. Not so much the political, the emotional split. The problem today is that the majority party would want to sideline the minority because they are the Muslim body. They hold the city of Mecca. They represent Islam. So they would want the minority party to be sidelined. And of course, the great number of Muslim countries are in that majority party, except for Iran. That happens to be in that minority party. Incidentally, the population of Iraq is a great majority of it, about 75% are in that minority party, Shia. The rulers have always been from the Sunni party. So the Shia have never had any share in building the society, let alone running the government. This is the first time that the word democracy has been spoken. And that is why Ayatollah Sistani, who is the leader of that community, they are saying that no, we will not fight the invaders, we will stay put, let the Americans do their thing. One day they want to go away, then we will have free elections, we will establish our government. This is what is going on. The Sunni minority in Iraq sees them, the future. As soon as the Americans leave, the Shia will stand up and massacre us. I don't think that is going to happen.
I tend to disagree. If you look at it,
Excuse me, can we leave the discussion till the end? Because otherwise, I think we are coming to the end of this speech anyway. So we can have the next speaker after that.
The aberration in the whole situation has been the Al-Qaeda thing. They came into Iran and they took over the insurgents. The Sunni in Iraq, I think, don't want to side with Al-Qaeda. They want to live in peace like everybody else. And that is why I have hope that one day Iraq will come together, the Shia and Sunni will live together in peace, in harmony. They will bring a democratic government. They will have a stable society. Now, how long it is going to take, I don't know. It's anybody's guess. So this is the overall picture I gave you. And I'm sorry if I've taken too much time, but I had to bring you all this, to bring the whole picture, the whole perspective. And I'm sure other speakers will elaborate more on various points, and question-answer session will bring it more to you. Thank you very much.
Can I call upon Professor Young to the next meeting?
How much money do we have in the
I'd
library?
like to recognize Assemblywoman Linda Newstein.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Young, and I teach in the history department at Princeton Theological Seminary in Upshur Hill in the borough on Alexander Street. I would like to thank Dr. Aziz for her vision of what Muslims in America might have to contribute to peace in the world. And I think that's a very fine thing, very forward-looking, and I really commend her for it. I would also like to thank whoever brought the samosa. I'm glad to see that so many are still there. I would like to share some thoughts on what it's like for non-Muslim Americans to understand Islam's diversity. And I would like to share some thoughts also on how it is we try to get hold of what Islam's diversity really is in a constructive kind of way. And that is the sort of thing that I do a fair amount of in my teaching. I do it mainly, though, with other religions, religions of South Asia and East Asia, and not really Islam, which is not a religion in which I am professionally trained. Should there be mistakes in what I say, I'm sure that you will correct me or someone else on the panel. We are in America now in a very interesting period of time with respect to all of the world's religions, including Islam, the history of religions is really unfolding right here in front of our very eyes. Because all of the world's religions are here. And here in West Windsor, New Jersey in particular, as you well know. You're a part of that diversity here in America, but you're not the only part, because alongside of you and in your neighborhoods are Hindus as well, Buddhists, and many other religionists, we could say, from around the world. And so exciting opportunities present themselves to us right here. And so that is the general theme that I am going to use to weave together my thoughts today. The demographics we aren't really sure of. If we were to count Muslims alone in the United States today, what kind of population would we find? 3 million? 6 million? Lower? Higher? Gee, it's really hard to say, and no one really knows for sure. But the presence is significant. Now, that presence is not monolithic. I mean, it's not uniform. It's not all the same by any means. I'm not sure how much diversity is present in the room right now, but I know there is some. And as we get acquainted, maybe I'll learn more about the diversity represented right here and elsewhere in our environs here in West Windsor. I think one thing that sociologists have learned about immigrant religions in America, and all religions actually are immigrant, they're just that some came earlier from Europe and some came later from, say, Asia or Africa or elsewhere around the world, but all religions in America, except those of the indigenous peoples, America's Native Americans, are immigrant religions. Transplantation is transformation. That's kind of a general sociological principle. You do not just pick up a religion from another region of the world and pluck it down here and expect it to grow into the same kind of plant. It's going to change. It's going to look a little different. And so transplantation is no simple process. It's actually very complex. And transplantation entails necessarily, I think, transformation. So what kinds of changes would be going on in Islam within America? Some of those things maybe have already been alluded to by Mr. Naqvi. I'll go into them in my own way in some detail too. Same would be the case, of course, if we looked at Christianity outside of Europe and North America in the world that some of you who were not born here would recognize as a part of the interreligious diversity in, say, South Asia. The Christianities you find there are not identical to the ones you find here. So the same sort of thing. It's true. Transplantation is transformation. And so, an interesting thing about Christianities outside of Europe and North America is that they often go back to the foundations and ask themselves the question, are the kinds of distinctions that characterize Christianity in Europe and North America relevant here? So how relevant is it to us, say, as Christians in South Asia or Africa or Latin America, that the Christianity we were introduced to was Catholic or Protestant or Pentecostal or something else? There is in immigrant religious communities a kind of quest for foundations, and a willingness to ask questions, such as the one being asked here at this forum. How real is the distinction between Sunni and Shia? That wouldn't probably be the kind of question that would occur to you if this were another context, say, within the Islamic world. But here, in the immigrant context of America, that question has a real relevance. And I find it very fascinating, frankly, that it is being asked. Now, I've mentioned that I'm on the faculty of the seminary in the borough of Princeton. I work with students who are preparing during a 3-year program for ministry in one or another of the churches. And these students, of course, are acquiring different kinds of competencies. Some of them, all of them I should say, need to have a biblical competency, they need to have a historical competency, they need to have a theological competency. But interestingly, more and more, they need to have what I call an interreligious competency, because America is so diverse now. We're not, as you know so very well, Catholic, Protestant, Jew. That was a diversity that 50 years ago might have been more characteristic of America, but not since the 1960s. And so, a lot of what I do as the historian of religion at the seminary is give students a way of trying to think about the religions that are now a part of the American scene, including Islam. They don't always know what they're doing, and they're quite perplexed. As you know, also, generally in this country, knowledge of Islam is very poor, and Islamophobia is rampant. And that applies, of course, to good people in the churches as well as others. And so I find this very rewarding work, because I think these people, the students I work with, are grassroots agents of change. They could really make a difference for you and other faith communities in America if they only knew how to work with religions. But that's not an easy thing, and I'm sure you'll agree, with respect to other religions as well. Now, some of the students think, well, okay, to understand Islam, I should read the Quran. And that's, of course, encouraging to hear them say, but it doesn't answer all questions, does it? Sunni Shia is a post-Quranic kind of historical phenomenon, and so just going to the Quran isn't going to help you understand that. You need to know history, and you've gotten some of that already. You can go to the library, and you can take a book off the shelf, check it out, go home and read it, and you might master some historical facts, but would it really help you understand Sunni Shia? I like to put a face on the religions. I like students to learn dialogically. I like them to learn interactively by actually engaging in conversation with American Muslims. And we can do that so easily here in our part of the world, in our part of America. And you're a part of that. Some of you, I suppose, even have already. I know some who have spoken with my students and answered their complicated questions. But there are things that one needs to do to get hold of Islam's diversity that you can only do that way by talking to people conversationally, one-on-one. But even that's kind of problematic. So what do I do with my students who happen to meet on one occasion a person of, say, Sunni identity, and they get one perspective on what the true Islam really is. And then on another occasion, they get into conversation with someone from the Shia community, and they get a very contrastive perspective on what the true Islam is. Well, we always try to abide by one dictum. The believer is always right. But believers differ from each other. And then what? Well, we respect the fact that the believer's truth is absolute. There's nothing beyond or better than that truth. But we also recognize that that's the believer's absolute truth. And in our quest for an understanding of Islam, we have to take that at relative value. I think it might be helpful for you to understand what it's like, as I talk along this line, for us to understand who you are as Muslims in America. Another thing that I encourage my students to keep in mind in their conversations with American Muslims is the need to, excuse me, I'll have to use a big word, but I will explain it, de-theologize Sunni Shia. Now, there are people who would want to reduce religion to something else, to say politics or economics, and who would say that religious conflict is just a mask for other kinds of conflict of a political or economic kind. Generally, I'm not inclined at all towards that way of thinking. Religion is something you can't reduce, in every case, to something else. But there is something to distinctions like Sunni Shia. There is something to distinctions like Catholic Protestant in some contexts that can be reduced to politics and economics. And so, that's what I mean by de-theologize. It doesn't all go back to the 7th century. A lot of it goes back to the 20th century. A lot of it goes back to what happened in 2003. And I think a good argument could be made that America under George Bush became a catalyst for these kinds of identities to resurface in ways that brought them into conflict. And therefore, the very idea that what we're seeing in Iraq today is sectarian violence, I think becomes a kind of deflection from the real issue, which would be, I think, the collapse of a state. And when a state, a strong state, collapses, then something else has to take its place. And that means that older, more traditional identities, Sunni Shia, begin to play a major role, and not in a very constructive kind of way. So, there are ways in which we have to de-theologize and really look at how communities have perhaps enjoyed hegemonic privileges that were denied other communities. This thing has to be looked at in a very political kind of way. Oh, lastly, when I work with students on ways to get into conversation with religious communities of our area in a way that is constructive, I urge them to think about ways that we can de-globalize conflict. Now, you know very well, I'm sure, how enmities in one part of the world spill over into situations of tension in other parts of the world. You know very well, having been here in post 9/11 America, how acts of violence in one place tend to confirm, for some people, stereotypes about who the enemy is in another part of the world. Now, the problems we face are, I think, such that all people of faith and people of all faiths have to work together so that what happens abroad stays abroad. Well, when students that I work with get into conversation, it will often be that the capital T truth about the Islam is very much tied up with stereotypes about the other Islam. And students will be expected to agree with their interlocutor about their Islam as being the Islam. And I hope you bear in mind how problematic that is for Americans who are not Muslims. I would encourage you not to get into that with people who are principled and sincere in their desire to understand you. Allow for the diversity that is there in Islam. Okay, then to summarize what I've said, because I don't want to take further time, let me just go back for a moment to the principle that I introduced in the beginning, that transplantation is transformation. You don't just lift up another religion out of its context in another region of the world, Asia, Africa, or somewhere else, and put it here, plant it here, and expect it to grow into the same sort of religion it was previously. Identities don't have, in an immigrant context, the same taken for grantedness that they used to. Now that's quite a good thing. It opens up the possibility for growth and development. I think I started out also saying that this is an exciting time in America. The history of religions is unfolding right here in front of our very eyes. Islam isn't something way out there in the world beyond us. It's something right here in American neighborhoods. Unfolding before our very eyes. But is it unfolding before our very eyes in the very same way that it has been in other contexts for some centuries? I don't think so at all. There is a sense of continuity, of course, with the past, but there's also a sense of openness to the future that one has a sense of here in the American context. A new chapter is being written, but that chapter wasn't written already some centuries ago. It's being written right now. If I recall correctly, from years ago, when as a graduate student in Philadelphia, I was learning Hindi, and as many of you from South Asia will know, in Hindi or Urdu, what Hindustani one finds a fair amount of Arabic. I believe one of those words was kalam, which means the pen. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Good. My memory's not bad. I haven't used the word in ages, but I want to use it now because it's a way of saying that it's in your hand that you hold the column that will write that new chapter in Islam's history here in America.
Excellent. Very well.
Next, I'll call Dr. Mohammed Chaudhry to His thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm going to be very brief because I think you've heard a lot of history. And I would actually like to pick up on two of the points that Dr. Young just made. And I've had the privilege of being in his class along with Dr. Crane. He invited us to come and speak to his students.
We had the privilege of having you.
So it's a small world. You know, we come together in many different ways. In fact, my message goes to this whole idea of what he just said. What happens abroad stays abroad. And that's what I'm going to talk about, because that's very, very important for us to recognize as American Muslims. As to what is our challenge today as Muslims in this country, as full citizens, and participating in every aspect of life. And when we look at the conflicts that happen abroad, whether it's Kashmir, it's Palestine, Iraq today, Chechnya, and many other places, we need to look at ourselves inside and say, what does that mean to us as Americans? So I'd like to talk about that. I also like to touch on another concept that Dr. Young just mentioned, that transplantation is transformation. I'd like to introduce the idea of taking that transplantation to a three ways of looking at how one becomes part of a new society, a new culture, a new country that we've adopted. There are some who would say that because I come from a certain background that is different from what I see here, I do not want to have anything to do with it. And that means reject everything that's there and hold on to your values. And that results in ghettoization. That's when you have ghettos and people who simply do not interact with the rest of the world. Another way to look at that is assimilation. And you hear a lot of that, whether it's transformation or elimination or assimilation, meaning that you give up everything you have in terms of your faith, your values, your culture, and what you really hold dear, and accept everything that your new society offers. So that has its own drawbacks. In my view, as American Muslims, what I believe in is integration. Not rejection, not total assimilation, but integration. And to me, integration means that I am entitled and committed to my faith, to my values, but I am also in a position to identify those same values in the new society where I am. And therefore, I have no problem in saying that I'm proud to be a Muslim, while at the same time saying that I'm proud to be an American. In my mind, there is no conflict. So I would just like to say a few words about the Center for Understanding Islam that we started right after 9/11. And we had a two-pronged mission. And incidentally, that group of people that first met in a restaurant within days of 9/11, they began to all feed, included Shia, Sunni, and of all persuasions. And nobody asked any questions as to which group we belong to. Because the challenge was common. The challenge was such that it was overarching. It extended beyond anything that you could think of as a community. But in that meeting, and later on as we developed our mission, it was to help first Americans understand, other Americans understand Islam and Muslims. But second, and even more important, was to work on intra-faith efforts within our own community. So, as a part of that mission, I've had the privilege of visiting many, many mosques, trying to work with the leadership of the mosques. And that includes many Shia centers and many Muslim centers, whether they are run by Arabs or Pakistani Indians or Bangladeshis. I've been there. And I've talked to people with the same message in terms of what is it that we as American Muslims need to do. So with that, my focus really is, again, to go back to one of the items that if you were to introduce people to Islam by saying, go and read the Quran, and even if they just did that, following up on Dr. Young's point, the Quran would make it very clear. They would, of course, have to put it in context, would fully understand, would make it very clear that the kinds of distinctions that we use to develop hatred of one group or another were not permitted. The Quran clearly states that in very, very simple words. It says, we created you from a male and a female and made you into tribes and nations so that you may recognize each other, not that you despise each other. Had God wanted us, when He says that those who invent or those who advocate tribal affiliations are not one of us. Those who want to focus on tribal or hereditary kinds of links and say that makes you different and therefore entitled to certain rights or responsibility, rights or authority, that is certainly not the intent. So when we look at the example of the Prophet, we don't see a basis for the distinction. When we look at the Quran itself, its basic teachings, it clearly states that there is no basis. In fact, the Quran clearly even told right in the very early days that there is no distinction between an Arab and a non-Arab. And the Prophet clarifies that again in terms of saying those who would advocate tribal affiliation and use that as the basis of superiority certainly do not have that. So what does it come to us as we are trying to now talk to our friends in the non-Muslim world? And that means that we need to come together as Muslims and as Americans. And when we look at the differences that we all have, yes, you can find differences. But when I go back to the issue of whether the differences are of essence or they are trivial, differences of faith versus ritual, the true faith that's in your heart, that your relationship to God, whether I'm a Sunni or a Shia, and I don't think anyone would disagree with it, the Quran clearly states that if you believe in the Creator, you believe in the last day, the day of judgment, meaning accountability, and that you do good deeds, you shall have your rewards with your Lord. You shall have nothing to fear. That to me is the essence of the relationship of man, human beings, to God. In terms of our accountability and how we should be focusing on good deeds rather than on trying to make distinctions that are really not as important. And when we look at the commonalities, whether you follow one tradition in terms of rituals, and incidentally, I have had the opportunity to pray in Shia mosques, and I've had Shia stand next to me in a Sunni mosque and pray. And I have to tell you something. I grew up in Pakistan. And I never knew some of these differences. never became aware of the issue of whether you hold your hands in front of your body or you let them, stay on your side. And some of the other minor differences that you notice. You look at, since we began to discuss Iraq, I was just listening to a report the other night of a network reporter who lived in Iraq for many years, was reporting on what was going on. And he said that until 3 years ago, neighbors in Baghdad did not know whether their neighbor was a Shia or Sunni, and never asked. This is coming from an outsider, someone who has observed it. And of course we all know of the intermarriages that exist all over, in every society that I'm aware of. Okay? So to use those kind of distinctions for anyone to now sort of use sectarian violence as, or sectarian differences as a source of the violence and justification for some of the atrocities that are being committed is really not fair, and it shouldn't be allowed. So I think as Muslims in this country, whether you are of a Sunni persuasion or a Shia persuasion, we need to recognize that we have a number of things in common. We have one God, one prophet, one faith, and finally, one country. Living here, America is our home. This is where we're raising our children and our grandchildren. So we need to teach them the same message, that regardless of how you pray and how you practice certain things, you are a creature of God and you're accountable to Him for your actions. And doing good deeds and being good to others and wishing for yourself what you wish for your neighbors, whether they are Christian, Jews, Sunni, Shia, Wahhabi, or whoever they may be. That is the essence of what we need to focus on. So I have actually attended some of the major conferences organized by the Shia community, Shia leadership. And Dr. Crane and I have both publicly at those meetings made this offer, that we would like to invite the leadership of the Sunni organizations, to the extent that we have some, and we have a number of them, and the Shia organizations to come together when there are issues that we need to address, and we need to do that together from the same platform. That we shouldn't be doing that from a different perspective. And that offer still stands, and I have personally met with leaders and tried to understand some of the issues that come up. And I don't see a reason for us to worry about the differences. Okay? So I'm going to end with that by saying that as American Muslims, we are Muslims and we are Americans, rather than Sunni or Shia. And those who wish to make more of it, I think it is our job together to dispel those notions. Thank you very much.
Actually, it looks like it's perfect timing. I can see somebody entering the door. I have never met Sheikh.
Oh yes, I see. Somebody needs to open the door though.
Okay, I can report something.
How long do we have the suit? Out of 5 and 4.
As I said, he's an Iraqi, and we've been talking about Iraq and what's going on from a
How are you?
third person point of view.
See you. Good, good, very
So
good.
he'll have
Hello.
much experiences to talk about. If we can patient for a few minutes. Thank you. Well, as Dr. Iqbal said, when people have agendas, anything can be blown out. Where's the paper? As Dr. Young
I
said,
had to say for Professor Young is that when you're teaching students, and I said you mentioned about for them to distinguish between Shias and Sunnis, and getting their input about the difference. And the way we see, when we raise our children, they don't know the difference. And we want to merge rather than be torn apart.
well, with that comment, I will welcome Father Al-Sailani, who is the representative of Ayatollah Sistani from Iraq.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين ومن اتبعوهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. السلام عليكم أيها الإخوة المؤمنون والأخوات المؤمنات ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال تعالى في محكم كتابه العزيز بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. It is very hard for me to focus on any particular point in this time because I don't know what's going on. What the people talk before me. So
the ayat you just read, I just translated. So I use the translation.
And I'm very sorry to be late because of the traffic of New York. I didn't expect to spend 1.5 hours for a distance of half an hour only. So again, it is my pleasure and my honor to be with you and to try to discuss something about the issue which I understood that is the issue of the Shia and Sunni in Islam.
And your experiences in Iraq,
And my experience in Iraq. I don't know, maybe the other speaker, they cover the history of Islam and when the split happened between the Shia and Sunni. Very. And as far as the Shia and Sunni in Iraq, as you know, Iraq was the capital of Islam for a very long period of time. It's become a capital of Muslim or Islam at the time of Imam Ali sallallahu alayhi when he moved from Medina to Kufa and he considered it as the capital of Muslims. Then after that, the Umayyin took over and they take the capital to Damascus. Then it came back to Baghdad by the Abbasids. And then it's moved to Istanbul, Turkey. But in the time of the Abbasids, and the time when Baghdad was the capital of Muslims, the sect start there. The sect among Muslims start there. So I'm talking not about the sect, about the history of Iraq, since I'm concerned about Iraq, as we told. So the history of Iraq, it's depends almost totally on the history of the sect in Islam. Because all the madhahib, the sect, start in Baghdad, in Iraq. And we cannot close our eyes and we say there was no problem among the Muslims at that time, it was a really difficult time. In Iraq, from the time of Abbasiyin, that this sect, they fight among themselves and they kill each other depending on the name and on belief. And among the Sunni themselves also, there is 4 madhab. Also they start in Iraq, Al-Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. And among them, there was a great fight and a lot of bloodshed happened in Iraq. But my own experience as an Iraqi who live in Iraq, who grow in Iraq, who grow close to the religious people, not people who have nothing to do with the religion, but to religious people. I myself didn't feel any bad experience among the Iraqis and among the Shia and Sunni themselves. I myself have my cousin married is a Shia and he married to the Sunni girl and they have a family. And similar to that, if we enlarge the view, even the tribe of Iraq, some tribe of Iraq who live in the south, they are the Shia, and some tribe who live in the west of Iraq, they are Sunnis, and they are cousins. And this issue of Sunni and Shia never raised among the people themselves. But, again, just for example, that my own experience, my father also is a alim din, is a servant of Islam, servant of religion, and he used to have a very, very large, big gathering celebration when the time of the martyrdom of Imam Ali in Ramadan. And thousands of people gathered, and many different scholars participated in that gathering. One of them was the judge, the qadi, the judge of the Sunni. Because we have in the court, in the family court, we have a judge for the Sunnis and we have judge for the Shia. But the judge for the Shia, they are not active, so we act out of the court because the court has been appointed by the government, and we don't consider the government. So when this, his name Alauddin Kharufa, may Allah bless him, I don't know if he's alive or no, but he's alive?
Yes.
Sheikh Alauddin Kharufa.
He's in Chicago.
Chicago. May Allah give him long life.
That's my boss. This was a Qadi in Baghdad.
Baghdad. Yeah. May Allah bless him. He was so friend to my father. So he gave a speech about Imam Ali. No different between his speech and any other Shia who praised Imam Ali and who gave the right description to Imam Ali. So when he finished his speech and he came down, my father joked with me. He said, if you believe in Imam Ali in this way, why you become Shia? Why are you still Sunni? He said, if I convert to Shia, who will be the judge of the Sunni? So we live together, we joke with each other, we love each other, we marry from each sect, we have no problem at all. We live in the neighborhood, we eat the same meat. Anyhow, really it's very hard for me to remember any experience bad experience between the Shia and Sunnis while I grow in Tehran. But as far as the government concerned, when it's come to the government, we the Shia, from day one, we are out of the government. Oh, we consider ourselves as an opposition. Simply because we believe that the government who doesn't follow the exact sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it is not a legible government. And we should not participate in it, and we should not support it. This is our view. And when it's come to the government of now the sectarian government after the Ottoman Empire, it's become the kingdom in Iraq, and who appoint the king? The British appoint the king. And we consider that kind of appointment, it is not following the rule of the Sharia, rule of Islam. So we are not having the sword against the government, but we doesn't participate. And we believe it is haram, it is forbidden to participate or to support such government since they don't do the justice. There is no justice. So this is our opinion. And when Saddam and the Ba'ath Party came, and they didn't find any kind of support from the Shia towards them. Our maraji', our scholar, our ulama, they give a clear fatwa that it is not allowed to be part of the Ba'ath Party, because Ba'ath Party has a different opinion than Islam, and you should not participate. This is from one side. Saddam and his party, they act, not only believe, but they act that whoever not support the Ba'ath Party, he is against the country, and he has to be slaughtered. Not him only, but his family, his neighbor, sometimes his tribe, and sometimes it reaches to his neighbor. Just because your neighbor is against the government and you didn't report that, that means you are supporting him. So you deserve to be killed. This is why we face, the Shia face a very hard time, not from the Sunni, but from the Ba'ath, from the Saddam follower. But unfortunately, because the majority of the follower of Saddam is from the Sunni sect, it's become look like equal. That okay, we are suffering, the Shia, we are suffering, but from whom we are suffering? From the Ba'athi, but under the umbrella of Sunnis. Now when Saddam moved, alhamdulillah, and without this action of President Bush, he will never be moved. And we are happy that he has been moved. Even some people, they are not happy, but we are the Iraqi in general, and the Shia in particular, even with whatever we are facing of difficulties now, but we are happy that the future of Iraq will be, inshallah, much, much better than the past. So when Saddam moved, the Ba'ath Party and Al-Qaeda, they form kind of unity among themselves. And who is their enemy? Whoever took power from Saddam. Who is the people who took power from Saddam nowadays? Mostly they are the Shia. Mostly they are the people from the party of Hizb al-Da'wah, and Hizb al-Da'wah, it's used, there is a clear rule in the Saddam time that whoever a member of Hizb al-Da'wah, he and his family and his four level of relative, like suppose his cousin is the son of his cousin, or the son of his cousin, he is also a subject of torture, subject of prison, subject of kill. So nowadays, what you people notice, it is really not between the Shia and Sunnis, it is between the Ba'ath party and the Al-Qaeda from one side, and the people who support the democratic government nowadays from the other side. Sometimes it is even regardless of the sect, because they kill the Sunnis also. Some of them, suppose the vice, I believe, the assistant of the vice president is a Sunni, and he has been attacked by his own guard, the Sunni themselves. Why? Because he participated in the government. Now, Al-Hizb al-Islami, also he's a Sunni Hizb, and also he's a subject of, or a target of many attacks by the Ba'ath party. But again, they try to put their activities under the flag of the Islam and under the flag of the Sunnis. I believe this is the few points. I hope I give some light, and if there is any question or whatever the process of yours, I will be glad to answer. Yes.
It's just from your presentation. So the exclusion of the Shias during history, or the near history, was really because the Shias felt that the existing government at that time, whatever period, was not really a religious government.
Right.
So if that's the case, my situation to you now is, how would you react in the future to the existing or the coming governments if they try to be more secular governments?
Since now it is kind of a democratic movement in Iraq, and most of our scholars, they accept this term of this kind of government, or at least to participate in it. But it doesn't mean that we consider it as an Islamic government. It is not Islamic government, but it is respected government. Since they try to play the justice, since they try to give everybody his own right. So we are not considered as a eligible Islamic government. It's not Islamic government.
But would that justice be a secular justice or Islamic justice?
The justice is the justice. Islamic justice and any other justice. The justice is a human being, a theory, the justice. Nobody will have a differences when it's come to the justice. Sorry, yes ma'am.
What I'm trying to get a better understanding of is, given the history of Iraq and of the teachings of the Quran, how can the Iraqis hope to create a just and fair government that serves the people when it appears as though there are so many factions fighting against any one group? Where is this peace going to come?
It will come. I mean, now we are living in the United States, and we live in the United States, and you know the history of United States. Okay, when it's come to the slavery, they did a terrible treatment to the people. And when it's come to the war between the South and North, it was a war. It was not only a fight, but it was a war. But finally, after a couple of decades, we have peaceful land now.
I understand that part. However, the United States was separated from Europe and Asia by very large bodies of water, and Iraq is sitting right in the middle.
Let us just offer prayer to them. Yes, madam.
Yeah, I have a few questions regarding the Ayatollah Sistani has stated publicly that the dogma that has been held that in Islam the politics and religion are inseparable. He disputes that. He said there's really no linkage between the two. And I think that's a great forward-looking statement that came from him. Do you think that, as the gentleman asked here, is there a secular government that really breaks that dogma of uniting religion with politics, and that Ayatollah Sistani's followers would have no objection?
Most of our scholars, when it's come to the government, they say there is no Islamic government unless there is Imam who is infinite, Ma'soom. Then we will have Islamic government. Otherwise, whatever government we form, we try to apply some rule of Islam, but we cannot consider it as an Islamic government.
Just a comment to the forum. I truly appreciate what the Pakistani group is doing with this forum. It's absolutely magnificent. I really do. But just I would like to make just a short comment really on the whole spirit of this. I think just following up also on the professor's comments, which were unbelievably valuable. I think really we definitely, when we talk about peace, I think we really also need to talk about it within our community. And I think there is a tremendous work for us, the Muslim community, tremendous work to do to understand ourselves. And for us really to understand ourselves and be able to communicate with the Christians, the Hindus, the Jews, we really have to make very concrete and serious efforts to understand some of these religions. Because, especially with Christianity and Judaism, they are older than we are. Christianity also went through a Reformation period where they really had some issues like what we have among ourselves. And sometimes when we talk to these people, we talk to them as believers, not as people who went through the reformations that Christianity went to. So we need really to express our views a little bit with understanding who is listening to us. And I think that really will be a tremendous contribution to Islam we do in this country. It's really to be able to understand whom we are talking to. Because ours, unfortunately, sometimes really a lot of dogmas in it that really need understanding whom we are talking to. I think that will do a tremendous contribution, really.
Question? Okay.
You want to answer?
Joe, you want to get the camera down so we can move it around?
I'm sorry?
Thank you very much.
You can use
Yeah, please. We can talk from here. You just move the microphone to us and we can talk from here.
Sheikh Salmani,
Yes.
the question I had for you, I was waiting for, was you are a cleric representing Ayatollah Sistani in this country. And in Iraq, within the Shia community, there are three parties. One is the party of Sadr, militia. And the other one is of the Maliki government. And it's called the Dawa. The third one in the Shia community is the Padma of whatever name. So within the Shia community in Iraq, there are 3 political parties. And Ayatollah Sistani has been the one who has broken the peace in that area. He was the one, he's disappeared from the scene, and to my reading, I have no clue where he is. But this is something that through you, we need to work to bring peace within the Shia community. And what is happening with the Sadr's party is they think a cult has developed there. They think that Mahdi is the last Imam. He has appeared. So he is the Imam. So he should be the one who has brought peace, who is bringing peace to Iraq. But he says, I will not do anything. You have to break away with America first. Only then he's going to do something. So that is what I wanted you to comment on, how you can bring these people together within the Shia community. There are so many there in Iraq.
We have a great saying from Imam al-Hussein. Imam Hussein is the grandson of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he faced Yazid, and he sacrificed everything, including his children himself. One of his beautiful sayings, he said, "الناس عبيد الدنيا والدين لعق على ألسنتهم فإذا محصوا بالبلاء قلت ديانهم." He said, the people are the slave of this life, and the religion is just a talk on their tongue. And when they face problem, then the people with the religion, they will be shrink. That's mean the religion, in most cases, the majority of the people, I can challenge that the majority of the people, they are not religious. Am I right?
Yes.
So the Shia, it doesn't mean whoever calls himself a Shia, that means he is a real follower to the teaching of the Shiites. As any Christian who say I am Christian, but is really practice the Christianity? Very rare, very few. So those groups which the respected lady mentioned, they are very little, 3. I can list more than 30 groups among the Shia themselves. And it is not a matter of Shiaism here, it is a matter of politics and power. So the Sadr party or the Hizb al-Da'wa or the Al-Majlis al-A'la or many others, in many cases, they are looking for their own position, for their own prestige. And the religion, yes, they are religious people, but when the religion direct them to some direction which they don't like, So about, I don't know, this statement that you mentioned about the Mahdi and that the American has to leave, then he doesn't claim that. He doesn't claim it. And he tried to act with Ayatollah Sistani. Ayatollah Sistani himself, he tried his level best to act as a father of every individual and every party, to try to bring them to have kind of unity, at least for the basic. But when it's come to the details, we have a lot of differences. But at least for the basic, we try to bring the unity among them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question to which many of the, and you also alluded. One of the great principles of Shiaism theology is the rulership in the absence of infallible imam. Now the same philosophy, a fine concept, has been taken by some of these people, like Muhammad Jafar in Egypt, and created a philosophy with the responsibility in the absence is to fight, and it leads to the suicide bombers. Has ever the great Imam Sistani and others considered coming out with a clear fatwa and finding flaws, presenting it, so that it is not an easy job for whatever, Al-Qaeda or Americans or Saudis, to draft these ignorant people to do this?
I'm sorry, is it the question?
The question is, why doesn't Imam Sistani and others, scholars of the Shias and the Sunnis, have come out and look at that reasoning and find the flaws and point out in clear that it is completely wrong and he has gone wrong here, and we should not be, because the people who are drafted to commit as a suicide bombing act, they are ignorant people, they don't know. And they are purchased for money to do that act in the name of great Imam Hussein or some other, like how you sacrifice.
Okay.
You understand?
Among the Shia, I believe, at least I don't know anybody who is ready to bomb himself and to kill the innocent people. I don't know. And I can say it's never happened that the Shia, any Shia who believe to kill himself with the suicide bombing to kill the innocent people. Never happened. So the Shia, they are safe from this side. The other people, as you mentioned, they have been bought, and also some of them, they are very ignorant, and no matter what you will tell them, no matter who will tell them, they will not listen. They will not listen.
But I think the gentleman probably is saying, could the upper leadership in Shiites or Sunnis stand up really and say, declare that this is a no?
They did that. They went as groups of the scholars to Mecca in the month of Ramadan, last month of Ramadan, and they have a clear declaration that it is not lawful, it is not Islamically to kill the innocent people or to have a suicide bombing. They make it so clear. But these people who are Al-Qaeda or Ba'ath, they don't listen to this.
No.
They don't. They will never listen to anybody.
I have small 4 points here which I would like to comment on. Number one, I really like Dr. Chowdhury's speech. I wish if you were here. He made very 3 good points which is really makes sense. Number one, he says we should not polarize the differences between Shia and Sunni, because a lot of people, even they don't know the difference between them. And while Americans in here lead the people abroad, and the USA, it's very nice for me to say. Second thing, if you know Dr. Jawad Shirri, probably he used to be an imam in Detroit, Michigan, he's a friend of mine, and he came to my house, I went to his house, and we brothers, because I work in the Federation of Islamic Associations since 1953 to 1985. Many times he came to me and says, Dawood, I was the president of the Federation of Islamic Association. Please, let's have a conference like this on a bigger scale to discuss our differences between Sunni and Shia. What was my answer to him? I says, Dr. Jawad Shirri, I'm from Palestine, I was from Palestine, and I went to Lebanon, I went to Syria, and I lived in Jordan after that. after the great massacre which took place in my village, and I was one of the survivors. I said, I didn't even know myself what's the difference between Sunni and Shia. Nobody talk about it. Why are we polarizing this in here? So people who did not know about it, each one, like we say in Arabic, we make from habba kubba. We make small things, polarize, becomes a big things. Why should we do that? Because we are all Muslims, alhamdulillah, and we should be acting like this. That's number one. Number two here, as far as Qaeda and the Ba'ath, to my knowledge in here, the Qaeda was ضد البعث, because the Ba'ath is socialist and they are not really Muslims. I don't believe in them. I hate the Ba'ath, because they are criminals. Then now, I don't think there was a difference. There was cooperation as far as I know. I might be wrong. There's no difference. But this war in Iraq made them come together, which was nothing before. Number three, I believe like who said that? Is that you said? I believe that this difference or this peace will come to Iraq. Like I believe that peace will come to Palestine. I'm sure about this in here. All these things, all these people who are fighting is really, you're not good Christians, not good Jews, not good Muslims. Because there's a difference between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and between a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. Because our religions, all religions come together. But if I do something I should wrong, I should be considered a bad Muslim. But I should not be condemned by my religion of Islam. So now, to my understanding in here, is that if we really do not have any interference between anybody, and the Iraqi people get together, and there's no foreign interference, that's what I believe, they will come together because they lived before and they will live again. That's my feeling. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is for Professor Young. I think that the fact that the Americans invaded Iraq, and this is in defiance of all norms of international law, has elicited such an outrage in the Muslim world that they lose sight of the fact that the insurgents are creating this brutal killing of the innocent people. And they also forget the fact that the Iraqi majority has been ruled over 100 years by a minority of 30%. So the fact, and these two things get muddled in their minds, and because they hate the American invasion so much that they actually they applaud the action of the insurgents, which no sensible person can. How do you think of that possibility?
Well, about the actual on-the-ground realities in Iraq, I have no comment, and I leave it to colleagues on the panel who are better informed to comment that way. Well, I would say never underestimate the ignorance of most American people about what's going on in that part of the world, or as I was saying and others were saying too, about the diversity within Islam, even of the most basic kind, like Sunni, Shia. Who is it in the House, the American Congress, Sylvester Reyes, who is chair of the House Intelligence Committee, when asked whether Al-Qaeda was Sunni or Shia, thought for a moment and said, well, maybe Shia. And he'd been on that committee for some years, apparently, before becoming chair of it. So, yeah, don't underestimate the ignorance of most Americans about these sorts of things. Apart from the on-the-ground realities, which are so complex, and I have no special insight into them, I'm still asking myself the question that was posed over here earlier. And I'm going to say something about this ignorance that we all need to admit that we have. It's kind of interesting listening to some of the people here who were saying, well, when I grew up there, none of this mattered. someone from Sri Lanka, a Muslim from the Sri Lankan minority community, Muslim, only heard about these things, she said, I believe, when she went to Pakistan. So, you know, these kinds of things we have to unlearn somehow too. And it does have to do with Muslims, Jews, and Christians as well. It's not only Muslim or American vis-a-vis Iraqi or anything of that sort. Sometimes, you know, I think we feel that we already know each other and there's nothing more to learn. We don't really call into question what we think we know. And so I'm an advocate of unlearning and starting over. And in starting over, I think that we need to ask each other as members of different religious communities to teach us who we are, and start with the believer's own understanding and not with what we think we already know.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments on this one. First, in a course that I'm actually teaching at Rutgers University as a part of the lifelong learning program, we had a topic which included suicide bombing. And the research that has been done by Professor Pape at University of Chicago came to a number of conclusions, one of which is, I don't have the whole thing in front of me, but one of which is clearly saying that there has to be a support in the community for suicide bombers to exist. First of all, he points out very clearly that it did not originate, and it is not encouraged by Islamic fundamentalism. It is encouraged by events that occur on the ground. And, but more importantly, he said that unless there is a support system behind the suicide bomber, they wouldn't exist. So I think to that extent, the leadership and the community as a whole need to come out and condemn that, except for the fact that I would like to go back to a comment that Professor Young had made earlier, that we lived in peace and didn't worry about differences among Shia and Sunni because you had a normal life, where things went on and you took care of your needs and your family's needs. But when the government collapses, when the structure within which you live collapses, now you want to find other ways to distinguish yourself. Right. And that is what has happened. You know, here you have a collapse of a society, hopelessness that has been created, and therefore people are now utilizing suicide bombing or others with no justification in the faith, but as a political tool to try to convince the other of their point of view. And I think that's a challenge that can only be met by the local community. And therefore there's a need for the local community to come together and do that.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to clear up something that was said earlier in a question, and that is that Christianity and Judaism are older than Islam. Muslims don't believe that. Muslims believe that Prophet Adam was a Muslim. We believe that it was always Islam, so let's clear that up. Secondly, I'm an indigenous American, and due to the fact that half my family was American Indians, there's nobody in the room whose family has been here longer than my family. And that's with respect to your point that transplantation brings transformation. I don't believe that. There's one Islam, and you can find in America a Muslim practicing Islam in every way that it's being practiced in Saudi Arabia, in every fashion that it's being practiced in Iraq, and as you can see from this room. And from that panel, for they are diverse views, people who have different and varying points of view with respect to how to practice Islam, what you might call technical disagreements with respect to what Islam means. So your concept that Islam will not be transformed by its having come to America. And another thing I said, I think it's important people understand, the majority of Muslims in America are not immigrants. They're not. They are predominantly African American, like me. Yeah, we have been here long, and when we were here, our ancestors are what you might call direct negative recipients of slavery, and my grandmother's people, the Indians, are a genocide in this country. So the whole concept of people who come here and have some what you might call discomfiture associated with the fact that there's trauma and struggle trying to exist in America if you're colored. We live with that every day and accept it as part of the struggle life that we don't complain about. We just try to conquer it.
Alan,
do you have Do you have statistics? Because I think African Americans are
There's 3
maybe
million
a
of us.
million and a half.
No, there's 3 million of us, always have been, always.
But they're not practicing this.
Well, how do you know that? Who are you speaking for? Who are you speaking for?
Can I say something?
There are 3 million African American Muslims in this country, and one of these
Let's come back to the focus of the discussion. Let's come back to the focus, because I think, let God judge who practices and who doesn't.
It's not wants to make comment.
Yeah, there was a question here from a lady.
They said nothing wants to make comment.
Let me make a comment on this question there, because it has become so contentious. There are always 2 types of religion. Always. Any religion. There is a classical religion and there is a popular piety. Popular piety always changes with geography, economy, history. Classical religion always stays the same. What you're saying about classical Islam is going to stay the same. Popular piety is going to change with time. Professor Young is right. This is a matter of sociology. This is a matter of anthropology. You cannot question what is happening in the real world. What is in your mind is right. That is classical Islam. That's in my mind too. Quran is the same. It's staying in Arabic. We are going to Salat in Arabic. Not going to change. Popular piety will change.
I think it's a fair statement. I don't know you at all. Me and you don't believe exactly the same thing. Whatever your classical Islam is, it is not mine. I hazard that as a guess. So I'm telling you, and I'm saying unequivocally and without doubt, Islam will not be transformed in America because it will be practiced in a diverse fashion that is practiced every place else. And that's just the way it is.
Sit here and discuss this all night.
All right, we had a question, right?
But my question was this, that something must have changed in the thinking of Muslims, and I think it has to do with politics. When the Afghans were fighting the communists in Afghanistan, there was not one suicide bombing. It is a very recent phenomenon, and it has taken hold like wildfire, Whether you can, Muslims are killing Muslims, that's exactly what it is. In one way Bush is right, that we are not killing them, they are killing each other. And I mean, whatever may be the basis, but most of the, in Pakistan they are killing, they are in Turkey, no matter where you go. And so what has changed? And why hasn't more people, more Muslims?
Yes.
Well, first of all, there's a question here. If I
protested that this is wrong. We are under one God. One is Islam is for everybody. Why are we killing each other?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as I said, Pape's conclusion is that that fundamentalism in Islam didn't create. In fact, the Tamil Tigers are the originators of the suicide belt. They're the ones who started that when they wanted to attack, attack
The only difference is they use children.
Right.
We use adults.
So Muslims certainly didn't start it. But now, given the economic conditions or the conflicts that have occurred, people have continued to use that as a tool. And unfortunately, predominantly now, you find Muslims because that's where the conflicts are. Yes, sir.
My question is, I've listened to all of this, but certainly I'm not very familiar with the Muslim religion. So my question is that of an American who has maybe a little more, but maybe a little less knowledge of you than before. And my question is a burning question, which is, in what ways does the Muslim American community express its outrage on a sustaining basis to this what you call this flame
Darfur,
of
it is
so
other
that it can be
Americans who are
heard
talking
in the
about
American
it.
society? Because we know our newspapers don't print everything. But in some way, your voice needs to be heard loud and clear and in a sustained way. For every attack that comes, you must give an answer.
If I may just briefly say, and I'm sure others will add to that, but there have been denunciations, condemnations issued by religious leaders as well as all the organizations that exist. In fact, even in this country, within the state, I have been a part of organizations that have bought half-page or full-page ads. But for example, when Mr. Wilson was killed, he was from South Jersey. The community took a half-page ad in the Star Ledger to condemn that. The Not in the Name of Islam, there's a petition that is circulating on in the World Wide Web that over 1 million people have already signed, and more people are being encouraged to sign that. So statements are issued, but the problem is the word does not get out because you can't always get the papers.
A comment from me. I really think, speaking as another American who's not a Muslim, that we need to pay attention to the bias of the media, which does not report the Islamic American voice. And if you just did a Google search and put in a phrase like Muslims denounce terrorism, you come up with 1,400,000 plus hits. And so it's not that no one speaks up or out, it's just that so few are reported. And so you have a different kind of organizational structure for Islam, which may account for the fact that you don't get voices that speak for it as you do for Catholicism or one or another of the Protestant churches.
If I could just add to that.
The media and press, like you said here, we put all the ads, but people don't need it, to read it. Number one, the press and media are controlled by Zionists. Let me tell you frankly. Number one. Number two, we fail ourselves to speak to the American people in the language they understand, like the Jewish people. The Jewish people have been here for a long time. They know how to penetrate into the American people because they speak the same language. Islam is still recently, but we're coming up more and more and more. As far as the criticism, believe me, you check the net, you check a lot of in our organization, how we condemn the terrorists, but like Chaudhary said, the media and the press does not spread it, and that's the whole problem.
Well, you see, how does media work? Media works, unfortunately, on sensationalism. And this is no news. If you stand and condemn, it's no news. The news is when somebody blows up 20 people or 100 people or whatever.
There's a question, but I'd like to add a quick comment. I respect Brother Dawood Asad, but I don't want to go to this notion of saying that the media is controlled by the Zionists, so therefore we cannot have a word on it. I think we have a lot of work to do. And we need to do that. Okay, we need to do a lot more in getting the word out, and every local, or how many of you, for example, write letters to the editor of your local newspaper?
I did.
All right? So the point is, so that's very, very important. I think we need to recognize, but I just want to give my brother a citation that on the website of the Center for Understanding Islam, www.cuii.org, you will find a link to the condemnation of terrorism by Islamic organizations. And there you will find some of these 1.4 million citations that are there. And they included the head of Al-Azhar University, which is the premier institution that would be the equivalent of the Pope issuing a statement in that sense, among the Sunni Muslims, certainly, and many organizations. So I think we have a sister who has a question.
The media bias can be seen very clearly in the way the Virginia Tech news was published and circulated on CNN and all the channels. The word terrorism was not used for that guy who killed 32 people and then killed himself. He was a suicide shooter, but nobody said anything. And those words.
How about Oklahoma? How about Oklahoma?
Those words were not used.
How about Oklahoma?
Let's take us.
I have a comment about the condemnation of terrorism. I think that since September 11th and prior to that,